So I want to welcome everyone to our session titled Making Remote Learning Work for Adult Learners. My name is Susan Young. I am Assistant Director of Workforce Learning at JWell, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. And without further delay, I'll go ahead and warmly welcome our speakers. So we're joined today by Eric Bergerman. He is Senior Director of Executive Programs at the MIT Sloan School of Management's Executive Education, and also Àngels Fido-Bertran, who is Vice President of Competitiveness and Employability at the Open University of Catalonia. So I want to welcome our speakers in addition to all of our participants here. And get us started. You know, one of the premises of this conversation here today is that teaching working adults is different from teaching typical students, what we call typical students. And I'd love to dive into that a bit just to get a better sense of the types of people, types of learners we're talking about. So could you, from your respective institutions, kind of characterize what that difference is between teaching working adults and other types of students based on your experience? Àngels, start with you.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much. I'm the Vice President from the Open University of Catalonia, so hello from Barcelona. I'm very happy to be here. I'm also a member of the JWell community, and it's a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to share our experience in online learning, because we are a fully online institutions, and also to share our thoughts in this exceptional period that we are dealing with. No? As we are an online university, most of our students are what you have said, working adults. No? And when we consider teaching for working adults, I think that we are talking about lifelong learning. No? Then into that context, I think that there are two attributes that are crucial. First one is flexibility, and the second one is advice. Flexibility because, and I think that's different from the young learner, what a working adult learner expects is a space, like an environment where he or she is able to choose what to learn, how to learn, when to learn, in what order to learn, or even at what pace. No? And this flexibility needs, on the other side, advice. Advice because into that flexible context that is in some places called like a personal learning cloud, the student needs guidance to choose correctly, to choose the right option. No? And even though these two attributes are very relevant from my point of view, they are not easy to join, because in addition, lifelong learning is also a social activity, no? A social activity that needs to be socialized and contextualized. Then when we deal with teaching working adults, I think that we are moving to a scenario of learning that it's more related with a learning experience that has to be delivered or execute between the limits of flexibility on one hand and professional interaction on the other hand. And flexibility cannot mean individuality, so we have to be flexible, but not, we don't have to arrive to the individualism, and interaction does not need to involve synchronicity. So in any case, I think that this experience is not only to deliver products, but also requires like a coaching system that meets these dual needs of the participants as a learners, of course, and more into an online environment, but also as a professionals. No? So I think that this intensification of flexibility, advice, and also social and professional interactions are the main attributes of this teaching for working adults.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I like the three pointers there. And I think for you, Eric, it'd be great to have you react to those three and add some of your own when it comes to your experience working with adult learners.
Sure. So thank you, Susan. Thank you, Àngels. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning, this afternoon, this evening. Great to see so many of you who are really committed to learning about learning and improving learning. Angels, I would say yes, yes, and yes to what you said about flexibility, advice, social and professional. I think all very important. Just a little bit on my background. I have been at MIT Sloan Executive Education since 2006, and my primary responsibilities are to oversee a portfolio of non-degree custom engagements for organizations, and also public programs as well, both face-to-face, in-person, and now digital, as we are all doing right now. I have a second responsibility overseeing our capability development for program design and improvement in the office. And so that means working with my colleagues and with the faculty to come up with support, I would say more in a consultative way with them to create good learning designs that will meet the objectives for adult learners and professional learners. So great, this is a very important topic to all of us. As I said, I think I agree with everything Angel said. I would add to that something that one of our senior faculty often says when he comes into the room with a new cohort in one of our, or used to say when we had this long running engagement, he would look into the room and say, 500 years of experience here in the room. That's a huge difference between adult learners and younger learners. They are working professionals. They have a lot of experience. And that really relates to the learning from the standpoint of they provide context for their learning from their current conditions. They're focused on current challenges. They value the opportunity to have learning experience with us, but it needs to be something practical that they can use. Useful ideas, useful methods, and I think that plays very much into what Angel's described as the coaching pieces. Our faculty are not lecturing, they are providing some framing, some ideas, some examples of how these ideas have worked in business settings, and then really looking to create an application of that, those ideas to people's real current issues. I think one of the reasons that it works very well for us is because MIT has this in its DNA from the founding in 1861. Our credo is mind and hand, which means what really gives learning value is what you do with it. So both parts of that equation are very important. And in our experience, my experience personally, that is where adult learners live, is in that juncture. I think the one other thing I would add to what Angel said and add a little bit is that social and professional aspect. Networking with other executives, I think in our experience, is very important. And we have conducted surveys in some of our engagements where people tell us that in fact, that when we've done longitudinal surveys, that networking with others and learning from others is one of the 3 most important things that they take out of the program. So that also has to be an essential part of the design, is to maximize the opportunity for adults to learn from each other as well as from faculty.
I think that's great. What I would love to hear from both of you is what the programs look like. You could pick one. I know you both are dealing with lots of different types of programs, durations, some synchronous, some not. But I think it would be great to hear just an example of what that experience looks like, what topics, what modalities, and so on. Get a little bit more specific. Anjos, we'll start back with you.
Okay, thank you. As I've said, we are a fully online university, so almost all our programs are delivered fully online. We have to consider that our students' profile, we always say that is a person who works, who has a family to take care, and who has normally a mortgage. So in addition, most of them enroll in our courses with the real expectation of improving their professional position, either by jumping into another sector or, for example, progressing in the field that they are currently working. No? So with this singularity that we teach for worker adults, we design our portfolio with a comprehensive vision and career orientation. No? This comprehensive vision, because considering the professional needs, we need a wide range of programs and ranging from vocational training to short learning and micro learning programs. No? In between, the highest proportion of our students are enrolled in traditional programs as bachelors and masters. No? In terms of academic or professional fields, we cover the main areas that has no problem to be delivered online, and that are the most demanded programs in higher education, no? From humanities to engineering, going through social science and digital health, for example. If we consider the skills level, we teach from vocational training to executive education. But what is important is to take into account that each type of program responds to specific personal and professional needs. Some of them are more time demanding or more intensive, while others are less time demanding. Some of them are very specialized, while others are more general. Some of them are focused more on the content, while others are focused on skill development. So what has in common all our programs is the methodology. Basically, our methodology, as I've said, is fully online and is based into 3 different pillars. First one is the interaction with peers, because as Eric has said, in the professional field, is as rich the orientation that give your teacher than the professional background that the other participants of the group can offer to you. So interaction is very important for us. Secondly, the learning resources that have been designed and conceived for being delivered online. No? And this is not a master class of 1 hour of a professor teaching just in front of the screen. No, it's another kind of learning resources that are more designed for being delivered online, and also the platform for sure, the EdTech tools that we need to teach, and then the coaching system that our students has. For each course, they have a specific teacher that is specialized in the subject that they are teaching. But we have also what we say a tutor that is the same during all the time that the student is with us, that give him advice not only about the courses that they are taking, but also about any other questions, professional questions, deal with personal situations, and tries to motivate and keep the student engaged in the learning process that, as is a part-time process, sometimes it takes, for example, more than 6 or 7 years to complete a bachelor. So the motivation is very important for us. Despite the number and the characteristics of the programs and the methodology, the service that surrounds or covers this comprehensive portfolio takes special relevance. No? Career advice, psychological advice, or many other advices have to be considered into also this comprehensive point of view.
And I also want to dig into the question of advice a little bit later on, because I can imagine what students are coming to grips with now is a lot different from a year ago, and will be a lot different in a year, you know, as people are losing their jobs, needing to reskill, change careers. So I'd love to dig into the advice piece that you mentioned. in a little while. But Eric, I want to go over to you. I know that you've got a little bit of a different setup over at Exec Ed, and you're working with students on a maybe shorter term basis as opposed to working for many, many years. And it'd be great to hear the, I guess, the types of topics and formats that have been really resonating with adult learners generally, you know, what you offer them.
Sure. No, thank you. So, so to Aniel's point that Catalonia is a fully digital university, we have become a fully digital school this year, owing to the coronavirus. We have not conducted programs on campus or off campus, as we also in the old normal used to do both. Everything that we do now is digital. So I think I'll talk first about the form of offerings that we have, and then I can also speak a little bit to the substance, the content, or the main themes, and maybe a little on methodology. We actually, in some respects, we're well positioned for this moment insofar as we offer a number of asynchronous self-paced digital programs. We now have 21 of them. They are about 4 to 6 hours a week on average, running over 6 to 7 weeks. They combine videos and forums, discussion forums. They have application. As I said, that's very, very important at MIT. And to Angel's point, self-paced is very important for people who are working professionally. So we have those, a growing number, and we think that they're very high quality and they have been very well received. We have migrated our on-campus public programs to run over Zoom. We started this in March. We are continuing, we're in the middle of our summer season right now doing that with what we call Live Online. I think the structure of our programs, to Susan's point about working with people on a little shorter time frame, our public programs have been predominantly 2 days or 3 days on campus, and that's different, I think, than the mode of executive education, which tends to be 1 week at a time. And as I'm sure all of you are aware from having spent a lot of time on Zoom, a week on Zoom is a lot of time. And I think this has been very challenging to many schools, many peers, some of whom have essentially stood down their exec ed departments and redeployed people. We have found that we've been able to convert those 2-day models very successfully to Zoom. And so they run now live online. Some will run 2 intact days. We also have them spread out over 3 days or even 4 days. And we have almost 50 offerings in that space, so quite a lot of choice there. And of course, we also do a lot of custom work for organizations specifically. All of that is on Zoom right now. In terms of the topics, we have very much focused, I think, on topics that are one would associate with MIT Sloan and with the management school of MIT. So in particular, strategy and innovation is a big theme for us. Technology and operations are big themes for us. Leadership and management are big themes for us. Organizational culture field actually was invented in the 1950s at Sloan. So that's very much part of our DNA. And as all of you know, you can't get much done without leadership. So those are 3 main threads. We organize our curriculum around those 3 streams. And we also provide non-degree certificates in those 3 streams as well. And so that does tend to lead to longer term engagement. We certainly have some people who might come to us because they need 2 days on technology strategy, but we have many more people who will come to us over an extended period of time and earn a certificate because, yes, they need technology strategy, but they also need something in leadership. They need to understand something more about the nature of technology right now. And that creates opportunities for long-term engagement with us.
All right, I want to thank you both. I think this has been helpful for us just to spend some time talking about, where you're both coming from and the types of learners that you're working with. Some of the things that have been said in the chat, are similar. These students who are coming to you, who are working, don't have time for long programs, are looking for professional advancement, do need something that's quick that they can take when they can take it and on their own schedule. So I think that's been a good foundation. I do want to move us into talking about your emergency response to the pandemic and what that's looked like at your respective institutions. We've had some themes kind of creep in just based on what you've said, Eric, that a lot of exec ed programs are kind of standing down, not really able to make this pivot. It'd be great to just hear from you, and I'd love to hear from people in the chat too, what your top challenges have been dealing with this over the past couple months. We'll start with you, Eric, just to mix things up a bit.
Sure. So what are the big challenges? I think one of the challenges is that many adult learners, while they are strapped for time and they do need to maximize the value of their learning, they also enjoy coming to places distinctively to learn. And there are many wonderful universities in the world that are very distinctive places to learn. We think MIT is one of those places, but people can't come here anymore. And so to the extent that some individuals will perceive that being here in person is important, it can be a bit of a challenge. There's some skepticism to say, how is a digital program delivered over Zoom? How can that approach the same kind of impact? And the answer is, we work very hard to make sure that it does. It's not possible to step outside into Kendall Square at the moment, although we're interested in looking at trying to give people a sense of that virtually. I think the biggest thing goes to being able to maximize the interaction. Adult learners have a lot of experience, as we said earlier. They like to talk with faculty. They like to talk with each other. So making sure that we have a learning design so that people get a lot of chances to do both of that because they know they get a lot of learning out of that is really job one. So I think that's a first challenge. I think a second one, and I have to say, just maybe to tell a little story, many of you may be familiar with a Hollywood movie called Singin' in the Rain from 1951, a wonderful musical. I was watching Singin' in the Rain early in April. I sat down on a Saturday night to relax, and all of a sudden I said, oh my God, this movie is my life, because this is a movie about disruptive technology. When sound pictures are invented, all of the people who thrived in the world of silent movies suddenly have to reinvent themselves. And I thought, so I couldn't watch the movie I can't watch it in the same way anymore. I thought, this is happening to us. We've been teaching disruption for a long time. It does require different tasks, different responsibilities from faculty, from staff. There is some discomfort at first. I have a colleague at IMD who said teaching in a digital room is totally different experience because she's used to getting energy from the classroom, and she has to find the energy in different places, and she is, but it's a very different process. I think as long as we stay functioned on the goal, which is to create high value learning for adults, we're just finding different pathways to deliver that. And as we look back, we say, well, we have been doing that periodically in our lives as well, different methods. It's just happening in a very fast, compressed way at the moment. So I think for us, making that leap in this particular point in time, those are two things which jump out in mind, and I think we're making progress on both of those.
All right, Anjos, what are your reactions to that? And love to hear what the rapid responses look like at your institution, but also maybe you can tell us some stories from working with peer institutions in Spain and across Latin America, because you know, as you mentioned, you've been online, but things have still kind of changed, and you've been sharing the wealth of information that you have. So if you could tell us more, it'd be great.
Okay. Well, I think that within this day, and although we are a fully online institution and our methodology is based on asynchronicity, so it's quite easy for us to make some changes to be more prepared for the COVID situation. We also have acknowledged the resources, all kind of resources for sure, and the capabilities, individual capabilities, but also collective capabilities that we have to accelerate our own transformation to a more efficient and digital organization. So it has been also a challenge for us because some things has changed. Although you can think that we are also an online organization, most of us used to work face-to-face, so all of us have been removed to teleworking practices. So the organization has also been shaken for the pandemic, and I think that we are also in progress, as Eric has said, in terms of organization, no? Because we have learned and we have made some tests about things as flexibility, synchronicity, and we have understood, for example, that we need some kind of consensus internally about what is needed, no? In terms of flexibility, because the situations are diverse. There are people that works better at home. There are other people that needs to be at the office because at home is very difficult to work. We also need to promote individual responsibility because that generates trust. And we also need to respect for the conditions that we have agreed, no? Which at the same time promotes cohesion, no? So the situation that we have faced has been also a test for us on our own dynamic capabilities, no? That these capabilities are not only technological, but also organizational and managerial, no? And I consider that these capabilities are especially crucial in that situation, no? That ability to observe, to learn, to adapt, to absorb new knowledge. And talking about the cooperation that we have been involved, because I think that the situation, another characteristic of this situation is that the cooperation initiatives have been more intensive these days, and that's for me a good consequence of the crisis, and the one that I hope that in the future will be also considered, no? So as soon as we realized that remote teaching would last several months, and that in the period and in that period the higher education system in Spain and everywhere had to be transferred to an online environment, we wanted to help for sure, no? We wanted to just share our experience, not only in Spain, but also in Latin America, because most of our learning resources are for Spanish speakers, and we have a very good relation with the Latin American educational systems. And first we collaborate in create a specific platform that in Spanish is called Conectados, is something like to be connected, promoted by the Spanish government. And in that platform, universities could find some resources, guides, learning resources, assessment guides, and many other advice. For example, how to motivate students in a remote system. And after that, we realized that it was not enough, no? These resources were good, but there were static resources and we could do more. So then the Faculty of Psychology and Education, but with the collaboration with the other faculties and promoted by the Vice Presidency of Globalization and Cooperation, we organized a series of webinars, 24 webinars that were exploring different questions. For example, how to start, or how can I redesign my courses, or how can I motivate the students, or how can I assess? And these webinars had a very good attendance. I think that more than 20,000 connections. I think that half from Spain, but the other half from Latin America. And after that, we have just started delivering short online courses for Spain, but especially for Latin America, where the academic year has just started, in order to have the opportunity to share our knowledge about how to design an online courses. But we have to take into account that this is not to create an online university, which cannot be done in a few weeks, but is more related with how to transfer your face-to-face activity into an online platform. So for us, is very good to have this opportunity to help, but also it's important for us because we need that new online learners have a good experience when they start studying online, because if not, that's bad for us. That's the risk of these quick online new programs, that if they don't have enough quality, or they are not being designed properly, maybe the students' perception about online could be bad, and that's not good for us. We need to promote the quality of online learning, because we do know that is the most accessible education, because you can give access to many other people that in other situations it's for them impossible to access to higher education. For example, we have more than 2,000 people with some recognized disability that if it is not online, they would not have the opportunity to complete a bachelor or a master. So I think that it has been a great experience for us when we think about the cooperation actions that we have made with many other higher education institutions.
What I love about that sentiment too is it's adaptation. You're working with learners that you've worked with before, but just in a different way. But it's also opening up new conversations with new types of learners, as you're saying. So it is important to, yes, we can't get 100% right at the first shot, but it is a nice kind of entry for a lot of people to be able to say, maybe this is something that I can do. Maybe learning online is something that's possible and something that's high quality. And one thing that I've heard you both speak on is the role of technology really being an enabler of new ways of doing things and relating. And that kind of circles back to what we were talking about with the importance of professional development and networking. So it'd be great to hear more from you about how technology has enabled that to continue to move forward for these learners to be able to relate and do things still. It's all about what we do with the technology. In and of itself, it's not great or useful, but it'd be great to hear how you're using it.
Me?
Sure, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think that if we think about technology, sometimes we think that teaching online is an issue about technology, but it's more than that. No, if we talk about sustainable online learning, we have to know that we need some resources and capabilities that are not evident, neither immediate, but most of them are not related with technology. It requires a special organization And that means a specific way to organize money, people, governance, and many other capabilities. No, for example, all the learning resources and learning strategies are focused on online teaching, from the designing to the delivery. So technology is an enabler for sure, but I think that these other individual and collective capabilities, theoretically they are called dynamic capabilities, are even more important than the technology. So it's quite different, as I've said, trying to move from a face-to-face teaching to a virtual environments in an exceptional situation as the one that we are living, that to be an online university, no? So what we have done this time is just to give some tips, some recommendations to the other universities to make this quick transfer to an online platform. But that's not to be an online university. So an online university means to be a digital organization where people are organized differently, the budgets are built differently, and the technology has another role than and it's not only for teaching, but for any other issues. But apart from that, we also have to be care about humanizing the university. So the role of our advisors, tutors, teachers, and all the people that is supporting the learning process of our students as important as the technology. People needs to feel that they are not alone in front of a screen or a laptop. They need to know that they can work with peers, but also if they have any personal situation, they always have someone who will listen to them and that will help them. So I think that sometimes we focus on technology and the main important issues or questions are not technology. It's the full organization who has to move toward a different kind of institution. I don't know, Eric, you think like that?
Yeah, Eric, what would you say to that?
I couldn't agree more. I think that's spot on. I mean, I do think there are aspects of, you know, a good technological platform makes this process a whole lot easier, right? I mean, it's the statistics. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but I'm active in a university, the University Consortium of Executive Education, UNICON, as the benchmarking co-chair. It's a global nonprofit of business schools, exec ed departments. You know, in the we did a pulse survey in the spring. 3/4 of people are using Zoom, and I think there's probably two reasons for that. One is it gets more complicated all the time, but it's still pretty simple to use. And a second thing, which is really important for adults, is breakout rooms are built into that. So you can send people into table discussions very easily. Other platforms, you have to do workarounds to make that happen. I'm sure others will catch up to that. But, you know, that's an enabler. If you don't have to worry about all of the details of that particular technology, then your faculty can focus on what really matters, which is how do you generate those good discussions, and, you know, how do you make sure that everybody is participating in the discussions to that. So I think absolutely, yes. I do think we are looking, and not just looking, we're doing doing more to expand beyond this particular platform of Zoom and bring in other technologies. For those of you who are familiar with System Dynamics in the beer game, we ran a digital version of that earlier this week. And I was in the demo of it last week, and I came a long way in a short week to do that. But, you know, that's another exercise that engages people. It's very intense experience for those of you who have played it in person. And I think, we did a reasonably good job of recreating that experience, as well as bringing across some of the central points of this around structure generating behavior and, how bad systems will beat good people every time. So again, it's the technology has to enable what people are going to do already. I'm in vigorous agreement, I think, as you can tell with Anjel's about this.
And with our last 15 minutes, I mean, we've already kind of jumped around a little bit, but I would love to just focus on what the future of all this is, because we've all been in some shape or another kind of through the emergency response. We've talked a bit about what sustainability means and the kinds of principles that we want to bring forward with us into thinking about how to make this something we can do in the fall or as school years are beginning. But it would be nice to hear from both of you your thoughts on how educational institutions can better support working learners, particularly in this time. So we'll start with Eric.
Okay. So one thing I think is to have the broadest variety of offers for people. People like to learn in different ways. People have the amount of time that somebody can offer at any particular opportunity is different. So for some people, a self-paced way of learning is going to be the way that they have to learn. For others, if they have an objective to, the characteristic of some of the self-paced is that they tend not to have the same kind of engagement or interaction with peers. At least in most examples, they may happen through discussion forums. That's still very valuable, but it's different than having everybody in real time in a room at the same point. So the opportunity to put both of those learning modes, I think, is very important. One of the most important aspects is to make sure that professional staff like myself and our faculty are constantly working the feedback loop from learners. So, we now made a switch in our live online programs. We used to poll people at the end of a 2-day program to say, what did you think of the program? Help us for the next time. Well, we got to know sooner than that right now, because we're in uncharted territory to some degree, or less charted territory. So we poll people at the end of the day on this to say, how are the sessions? How was the interactivity? What can we do better? Because if we can make a change overnight and in real time, we're going to do it. So I think always being open to continually sense making from our learners. What are their big issues and how can we bring those into the classroom and help them solve their problems? I think that's the biggest way to help adult learners, is really meet them where they are and help them to solve their problems.
I love that. And Angelos, I know part of that is what you're talking about with advice, but it'd be great to hear more from you about what this educational support looks like from your perspective.
Yes, I think that despite this current situation, I think that even more because we are living, we know, in an always changing world, no? And there are, at least the pandemic has accelerated some deep movements that are changing not only the job market, but also the society, no? Digitalization, but also globalization, the problems with the sustainability of the planet. These are deep movements that have been changing our labor markets and our society, and into that we say the VUCA situation, the society, I think, that has even more a higher expectation about what universities has to do in order to boost employability of new graduates. So So these changes in technological, economical, and societal environment has questioned the design of the training programs, because that typical image of a single professional profile for a unique lifelong work in a single organization is no longer valid, no? So students need to understand how they can design their own training path and their own professional career. And despite the education itself does not guarantee employment, we know that. In Spain, we have a big issue with that. There are some features related with universities, organization, and the teaching activity that, for example, the apprenticeship programs, the mobility programs, that influence the insertion of the graduates. And these are issues where the university has the opportunity to improve, no? So I think that even more what is necessary is that the universities ensure that their graduates are prepared to manage their professional career, no? And this professional career will be even more complex, more dynamic, will include more transitions from one job to another one. And in this way, career service becomes an strategic resource and has to be valuable for the student, or to the student during all the learning period, and not only once they have been graduated, no, or they are an alumni. So we must consider that these services are that boost employability and many other characteristics, as these mobility programs or apprenticeship programs, are even more an attribute that the students consider when they take their enrollment decisions, no? And for these reasons, I think that in many institutions, these services has been moved from a peripheral importance level to have a central position in a strategy. And that's also our situation now. We are just redesigning the role that our advisors has to play with our students, because the portfolio is even more diversified. The profile of our students is also even more diversified. We have younger students that maybe some years before we didn't have. We have adult students. We have people that wants to study for pleasure. We have people that wants to study for having a better future. So I think that if we want to serve citizens more empowered and more prepared for this changing world, we have to face two different questions. First, continuous training. So it's not only about bachelor's and master's, it's about short learning programs for sure. And then we need to deliver all these tools that the students need to self-manage their professional careers. So that's very important. So I think that traditionally the universities have been more focused on programs, and now we are making a transition to be more focused on service. And career service, for sure, is one of the most important things to be considered if we talk about service.
And what I'm hearing through all this is a time for reconsidering assumptions, reflecting on how you've been doing things, retooling in some cases, taking feedback and maybe doing it overnight. And it's really, I think, freeing to know that this is a time where we can do those things, where we should be doing those things. And so it would be great in our last few minutes to hear more from you about the lessons you've learned, or the things you're still kind of grappling with, and how other players can help you in that process. Because both of you have talked about kind of ecosystem approaches, reaching different markets, just sharing a little bit more about what you're going to be thinking or doing differently. And what I'll do is ask folks in the chat if they've got things that they want to add to that. What will you be thinking or doing differently, or considering that you didn't think you'd be considering before? But for our two speakers here, Angelos, we'll start with you.
Okay, I think that for us, this process, the way we have dealt with the pandemic, has promoted a deep reflection about if we need or not to rethink our mission and vision. No, we also have stated the capabilities, the resources that we have to afford these situations. No, and we have realized that, for example, that our people are very good at dealing with these exceptional situations. We are very happy about that. We also have been monitoring what's happening with the perception about online learning. This is something that, as I've said before, worries us, and we are trying to make as much speeches as possible to promote a good online experiences. We also have changed the way we are organized, and now we are talking about if we want to maintain this teleworking and in what conditions. And also we do know that future cannot be predicted. So what we need to be is an dynamic organization that can adapt, that can adapt to a new situations. That maybe is one of the most important issues that we have been considering. We need to be a dynamic organization. It's not about how we will deal with this situation, because maybe next year will be another situation. So we have to be prepared to make as many changes as the situation will ask to us to do. No?
Yep. So I think maybe two things. One of them is maybe a little tactical and a little technical, but this is MIT. We are at MIT. I think one thing is talk about other people, is that to the extent that organizations, startup companies, et cetera, who are working in the ed tech space can deliver more opportunities to create engaging learning experiences for everyone. I mean, from very young people to older people like myself and our clients, that will be really great. And there's some interesting things happening, particularly those that enable greater interactivity. I would not pretend to tell you that we have everything solved by Zoom, not by a long shot. It's pretty good for right now, but we need to continue to do better, partly because our learners need it, and partly, sitting with my executive education hat on, is we need to develop our own styles. We're going to attract people for particular reasons. Executive education is a very competitive field. We need to be distinct. So I think that's one thing. It's a little technical, a little tactical, but it connects to strategy. Something else, just also picking up a question from Angelo Biazzi in the chat. How is efficacy and learning outcomes measured beyond summative and formative assessments? Well, you know, this has been a longstanding issue, I think, and this really puts this on the table even more urgently. We got to get better at this in a world where at least we as staff and faculty, we might be in the same room with people. We have an opportunity to have conversations. We may see them more often, but if we only see them on Zoom and they're more distant, I think that distance implies some further challenges here. And particularly in a world which has just changed so fast, we have to get better at measuring the impact of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank Eric, Angelos, for both of you sharing your insights, your perspectives. I feel bad capping this off at an hour because there's so many more things we can talk about. This is a conversation that we will continue. We have to, as we continue to figure out how to do this better and better and learn from each other. So thank you both. And I want to thank all of our participants here who have been active thinking, the ones with your cameras on, nodding, shaking your head, looking, questioning, all of that. It's really great to see everyone. And I want to thank you for your time. And we will have future webinar and online offerings coming up. So stick to the newsletter and our mailings for more information on that. But anyway, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Angels. And thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Susan. Thank you, everyone.